Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth time for a Pint Virtual Get Together. I am Chris Mann. You have probably heard my voice before. You're now potentially getting used to seeing my face, for which I apologise. Some of you I've met in person at Time for a Pint Get Togethers. I've normally got a beer in my hand. I'm giving you a name badge so you don't forget who you are. So that's who I am. I am joined by my co-host, Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah,
how was your bike ride?
It was good. It was good. I'm now recovering with cider. So, you know, good. Would you like to introduce one of our wonderful guests?
I should. Thank you very much. Our first wonderful guest is Barbara Palumbo from What's on Her Wrist. You can find her on Instagram at What's on Her Wrist or whatsonherwrist.com. She's a freelance speaker, watch writer, and journalist. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, just outside of Atlanta. Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
I was surprised that you had me, but I feel honored. This is your your third. This is your third episode of this, right? Is this your third
fifth
or fifth?
Fifth.
Third good one. But fifth total.
Ouch. They've all been good. Matt, what are you talking about? Welcome along, Barbara. And I'd also like to welcome along and introduce Adrian Hailwood, valuer, author, speaker, fellow Watchnerd, one of the early members of Team Watchnerd, and the creator of watch-based top trumps, which I know a few of you have got sets of from various valuing days at Fellows. We were talking about the illegal sets, which are on the black market, very hard to get hold of. We're not going to be distributing those for fear of getting sued, but it was an interesting story, Adrian, so welcome along.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Chris. Yes, it's cease and desist letters all around. But no, they were not illegal. They were just advertised illegally. So yes, there are a few around for the right price.
So see Adrian if you'd like some illegally advertised, not real top trump cards. He can hook you up. Watch trumps. So for those who haven't been here before and those who've been in the past, just for a quick reminder, the way this works is the four of us have each brought along a watch. We've taken some good pictures of them. They are in a slide deck, and we're going to go through one by one, talking about the watch, telling the story about why we have it, sharing some details about it, taking questions from other members in the panel, and answering questions from anybody who is joining us from the comfort of their own homes. Please use the Q&A feature if you'd like to ask a question, because it makes it easier for us to keep track of things and make sure we get anything answered that's important. Please use the chat function if you want to talk amongst yourselves. Kind of good etiquette says keep it open to the whole audience so everyone can join in the chat, just as if you were in a pub getting together with us for a watch get together. And yeah, let's do this. Adrian's Instagram account is Adrian Hailwood. Is that right?
Yep. It's simple. Yeah. A Hailwood.
A Hailwood. There we go. Well, thanks for sharing that, Matt. So let's get into the watches. Let's see if I can not break the technology this week. Stranger things have happened. Okay.
That's me.
So this is Barbara. So for the panel, there's lots of pictures. Tell me when you want me to click on it. I'm guessing you don't want this title screen. So let's go there.
Yeah, okay. Let's and we can kind of start talking about why I'm wearing this watch, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Oris ChronOris date was introduced in 2017, and 2017 was actually my second ever Basel World. I had only started writing about watches in 2016. I'm a 24-year veteran of the jewelry industry and some watches, and I've worked in different genres of the industry over the last two and a half decades. Yes, I started when I was 3 years old. Amazing. But yeah, you know, I found that I was gaining more and more interest in watches, and I decided that I was going to give watch writing a go. And I showed up 2016 to Basel World. I met Kathleen, who's actually here watching, and people like Mike Pearson with Fremont, and guys like Vijay Geronimo, who's the U.S. president, CEO rather, of Oris North America. And these people were amazing to me. And so when I went back to Basel World in 2017 and I had my appointment with Oris, they introduced the ChronOris to me. And you can maybe go to the next slide if you want to do that. For anybody who's unfamiliar, which I doubt anybody's unfamiliar, this has been a fairly popular watch. The first time the ChronOris was introduced was, I believe, 1970. It was the first chronograph that Oris had actually created. And I think they came out with another version maybe around 2005 or so. But 2017 was when they came out with the ChronOris date. And I'm in Basel, and I'm sitting with VJ, and he's explaining this story to me at the Oris booth. I'm having some awesome sushi. And he's like, yeah, you know, this is the Oris ChronOris. And not having a watch background and not being a watch geek by any stretch, and still not to a certain extent, but really loving a good story. I made him kind of tell me the whole story, but I was laughing at the name. I was like, Oris ChronOris, that's the worst name. Like, who came up with this name? It's a terrible name. So he's like, oh, believe me. He goes, I've heard it all. I've heard all the jokes. And I start to tell him this story. I said, listen, I have a daughter. My daughter is a hellion. I have 2 redheaded kids, ginger kids. And I said, my daughter's nuts. And when she was a toddler, she's 10 now. So this was 3 years ago, she was 7. But when she was a toddler, she was so bad. Like, she was just so badly behaved. And my mother-in-law's middle name is Flores, and my mother's middle name is Delores. So I tell VJ with Oris this story, and I'm like, yeah, when my kid would act up, my husband and I had a code name for her. Like, if he came home from work and I was working from home and I had her and my hair was going, I was going nuts. Like, you know, I was crying, and he was like, oh, let me guess, did Flores Delores show up today? And we knew that if we said that, that meant that, like, her hellion side was out. You know, she was like 3 years old. So that was a code word so that she didn't know that we were talking about her. So I tell VJ this story, and I went, VJ, when I go home from Baselworld, I'm going to write a blog post called Flores Delores and the Oris ChronOris. And he busts out laughing. He's like, that's amazing. He goes, I'll believe it when I see it. So sure as shit, because I wasn't really doing freelance for many publications at that point, a couple, but I was really focused on my What's on Her Wrist blog. And I got home and I wrote this. I started writing, and what I didn't realize, because I didn't realize I had it in me, was I started to write this article thoroughly in verse. I mean, the whole thing rhymes. So it reads like a Dr. Seuss book. So, you know, again, it's like Flores Delores, her father Fitzmaurice, her mother's name is Doris, you know, she sings in the chorus, her 2 best friends are Horace and Boris. There's so many words that were rhyming with Oris, and it was just flowing from me. And I was having a blast writing. I think I wrote it in a day and a half. So I finished it and I published it and I sent it to VJ, and he sent it to Rolf. And I didn't really know Rolf at the time. Like, I met him maybe once. And they sent it out company-wide. Apparently they thought it was great. They thought it was like the bee's knees, because it wasn't really a review of the watch, but what it was a story about this little redheaded girl whose dad was a watch collector and a clock collector. And the little girl was jealous of his attention to these watches. And he got this new Oris ChronOris, and she was super jealous of it. So she like kidnaps it in a sense. She steals it, and she and her friends go and they bury it, you know, because she wants the attention back from her dad. So it's a story. It's really a love story between a dad and a daughter. And what he explains to her at the end is that, you know, it wasn't the watch that was important to me. It was how I value time, and that time spent with you. And so, you know, everybody really loved the story. But then people started coming to me. They're like, yeah, you got to turn this into a kid's book. So a few months later, I texted VJ and his marketing team, and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, look, the story's written. I don't want any money from you guys. You know, I want to give it to you. But what I noticed was, as a parent, I would go to Baselworld, and you know, you get these amazing gifts. You could flip to the next slide if you want to do that. You get these amazing gifts if you're a member of the press from a lot of the brands, right? So you come home and you got like bottle of wine or a candle or a Hermes scarf or a backpack from Panerai, or, you know, you get these cool gifts. But I'd come home and my kids would be like, okay, what do we get? And I was like, you know, bottle of gin from, you know, like there was nothing I could give to. So I'd wind up being in like Zurich's airport in the Swatch shop buying a, you know, $120 Swatch watch just so I had something to bring home for my kids. So the way I pitched it to the brand was, if you guys turn this into a children's book, I want it to be a board book, and I have it. Like, I didn't want paper pages because I wanted little kids to dig it too, like to get used to it. I said, but if you guys pay for the illustrator, pay to have it printed, you don't have to pay me. The story's already written. I think this would be an amazing press gift to people who were parents. So they agreed, and it took, you know, to the following year, and the following year, 2018, when actually they did the black dial version of the Oris ChronOris. They launched the book too. So, and they gave this away as a press gift, and actually to some of the retailers who had kids, which the retailers thought it was so neat. And I got to be honest, I had a lot of people coming up to me, like in the Three Kings, asking me to sign the book, which I thought was kind of cool. So at that point in time, I had borrowed the ChronOris to wear for the launch, you know, and I had it for 6 months maybe. And I kept messaging Jamie, who was their marketing person at the time. And I was like, hey, when do you guys need this back? You know, I've got your watch. And they were like, nah, just hold on to it, whatever. And then they eventually gave it to me as sort of a thank you for doing the book. And I'm an editorial writer. I don't take gifts. I don't even have ads on my blogs. I don't do any advertorial writing. I only get paid by the publications whom I write for. So just for me to accept that was kind of a big deal, but it was like, you know what? Yeah, all right, that's cool. And so that's my story to this. So if you want to show those couple of other slides, that's cool too.
Fantastic, thank you.
So that's the book. That was actually the illustration who Amory Drury, who's I believe out of Connecticut. She brought this character and the characters in the book to life for me. Even the watch, she did an amazing illustration of the watch itself. And when she sent me these are actually slides that she sent me from the PDF of her illustrations, I cried because it you know, you have something in your mind, and when you see it completely come to life like that, like this story, and as you can see there, you know, it's all written in verse. And we also, if you notice, I also worked in the Oris bear.
Oris bear's cool.
The story. So yeah, it was kind of like we worked the bear in, and it's been great. It's now 2 years later, and I still have people who will message me who are either Oris wearers, or they're looking to buy an Oris, or they're going to be a new dad, you know, and they're like, hey, where can I get a copy of this book? And I always put them in touch with VJ, and I'm like, you know, and VJ's been amazing. He's sent out a ton of these copies. I think they had it reprinted.
I'm so glad you met him and I didn't, because I'm a biologist by trade originally, and I always think of slow Oris when I hear about Oris, which probably isn't a good thing to mix with watches, but slow Orises are fun. They're just not great on your wrist. If you don't mind, I've got a couple of questions from the audience. One was, I'm not sure if we saw it side on, but does it wear high with that NATO strap on your wrist?
I'm sorry, does it wear high? Yeah,
quite high given the NATO, or?
You know, I don't think it really wears high because of the NATO underneath it. No, I don't think so. I don't think it does. You know, it's funny. I have a Seiko Presage, which I wears very high on my wrist.
Yeah.
I only recently put the NATO on, and it is an Oris NATO, which I got at the Worn and Wound Watch Fair this past October.
That's the second question. Someone asked where you got the NATO from, so I think.
Yeah, I got it's an actual Oris. Well, you can't see it, but it's an actual. One of the pictures may show the it is an actual Oris NATO. It came on that beautiful brown leather strap, which I love. But to be honest, it's a men's watch, and my wrists are kind of thin, and the leather strap never really fit me right. The NATO is a little loose on me, but it fits me a little bit better. Plus, I don't have any watches on a NATO. And so this is my first NATO, and I was like, you know what? I love the colors. I love the black and gray. When I work out, I tend to wear this watch. I just did a yoga thing this week on Zoom, and wore this watch very proudly. No, I don't think it sits high at all. I mean, I know you kind of.
It looks great. It looks fantastic. Chris, you've got one of these, haven't you?
I do. I do. This is the watch that. I have the Movember edition of this from last year,
which I loved, with the mustache,
which is really nice. Which Oris very kindly gifted to me because I raffled off the last Oris Movember watch that I won from them.
That's awesome.
So if you're looking at Barbara's watch and thinking, I love that watch, I'd like to get my hands on one of those. This year we're going to be raffling off the Oris Movember watch. I've worn it a couple of times to Movember events to be like, hey, check out this cool thing with a moustache on. But it lives in my safe, and it's going to be worn maybe a couple more times, and then one of the people out there will get a chance to get their hands on it.
I love that. That's the mustache it's in the leather strap.
Yeah, so
right?
there's
That's
one
the
on the leather
imprint.
strap, and there's a little one engraved on the case back. And
Nice.
I think there's one on the keeper for the NATO, because it comes with a NATO as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
yeah, it's
Just to give Oris one more shout out. I'm double Orising today. Your guest last week was Eric Wind, and I'm wearing a vintage Oris nurse's watch, which came from Wind Vintage, that I have around my neck. This is the second one that I have that's a vintage nurse's watch, which was a pendant watch upside down that nurses used to wear on their uniforms. Some people also refer to it as a teacher's watch, but wanted to give Eric a shout out too, because I know he was on with you guys, and then like double Oris love, or triple now that you mentioned the Movember.
all the Oris love.
We're all Oris love right now.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All roads are leading to Oris at the moment.
Right.
Fantastic.
It's fun to say Oris. It sounds a little dirty. Like Oris. I don't know.
I mean, to be honest, when I first saw this, I thought it was ChronOris, like in Chuck Norris. But unfortunately not. Hey, another
Maybe
time.
next year. Yeah.
Any other questions?
The Oris Chuck Norris.
It's 39
Oris
millimeters.
Oris Chuck Norris would be an amazing book.
That would be a great book. I'm actually working on a sequel. This is the first time you're hearing this, but I'm working on a COVID-19 related sequel to this book that I'm gonna try to pitch to the guys too, and see if they'd be interested in it. Actually, including some of the characters from the original book, because I think, like, we could keep going with it. It seems to have been very popular, and they could make a little series. Plus, nobody's doing it. What other watch brand has a children's book?
That's a very good point.
Right.
Bernard in the audience has said it reminds him of the Omega Chronostock, which is probably probably
that
right
came
as
out.
well.
That came out in 1964, and the Chronostock came out in 1964 from Omega, and I'm really proud of myself that I knew that, by the way. So the ChronOris came out in 1970. Again, it's that tonneau-shaped case. That was really, I think, typical of the watches that came out in that era. So, yeah, totally. So. Yes!
Oh, and
Nailed it!
You absolutely nailed it. Chris, briefly, do you remember what the movement is, the size and all the other specs that I don't want to bother Barbara with?
It's a 733 caliber, I think, right? Caliber 733, which is size is 39 millimeter.
Yeah, it's the Salita caliber, isn't it?
It's like the homage to the Salita caliber. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, earlier you told me that you didn't want to do the watch nerdy stuff, which is why I went to Chris, and I really apologize now. It's made me look like a complete idiot.
Buddy, I printed the stats. I'm not so impressive.
Right, awesome. We can edit that. We can fix that in the edit. Right, I think that's pretty. We should move on. We should definitely move on.
Keep it in, man. Look, I have never sold myself as anybody who was like a technical writer. I am not a technical writer. Everybody knows that about me. I can tell a story, and that's where I shine. But I am not a technical writer. But yeah, I printed it, so I had it right behind the screen. I was like, oh yeah, 39 millimeter, I got that. But the chrono stuff, I did have to. There was nothing written about that because I didn't know I was going to get that question, but that I knew. So there you go.
And I'm not a video editor, so that's not getting edited out. So okay, should we move on to the next watch before Matt melts? So the next watch is Adrian's watch, the Smith's Imperial Automatic. Tell us about this watch, Adrian. Tell us the story.
Well, I thought we couldn't go too many more episodes without having something English and Smiths related. You've had a Roger, and so this is the previous best watch we produced as a country, mass-produced wristwatch. I love this. I think it is, it's a great contemporary size. It's nearly 35 mil. It's slim bezel, clear dial. So it actually wears really, really well, unlike a lot of Smith's outputs, which can be quite small. I mean, I have them right down to like 32 mil, but this actually wears really, really nicely on the wrist. But it is the only automatic caliber that we made in-house in this country. And I think it's just a phenomenal achievement. But the other thing I love about this watch is it's one of those shall we say, mythbuster watches. If you say to anybody who knows a little bit about the Smiths Imperial, which eventually became the Smiths Everest automatic, they'll go, oh yes, Smiths had to stop making that because they got sued by IWC. They apparently, according to oft-repeated myth, ripped off the Peloton winding system, pretty much copied it straight out of IWC, and that was why they stopped, because IWC sued them. And if you read pretty much any write-up, any blog, including some fairly eminent people on Instagram, have said, well, yeah, it's definitely true. If you're nerdy enough to read the output from the British Horological Institute, in 2017, some of the kind members there actually wrote to IWC and said, can you go back into your archives and see whether you ever sued Smiths or even threatened to sue Smiths? And they did. And the answer came back, nope, nope, Smiths who? No, frankly, never knew, never cared. So yeah, it's one of those things where they didn't stop because they were sued. In fact, they produced it from about 1959, I think it was launched. It was an Imperial up until 62, and then it became an Everest, because in a very, very English way, 10 years after the event, we kind of went, maybe we ought to make a fuss out of that Everest thing. You know, the kind of first watch up there kind of thing. Didn't want to shout about it too much at the time. It's kind of a bit brash and advertising-y. But hey, we'll kind of casually remind people now our best watch will have Everest written on it. And so from 62 onwards, it was the Everest automatic. But then they just stopped producing the manual caliber that it's based on, and that was that. So they moved on to producing a different caliber. They never had an automatic version of it, and it died. And then, as we know, sort of only a very few years later after that, they stopped making movements at Smiths altogether. So it is quite a rarity. Dial isn't in the best of conditions, to be honest. Smiths were not great at producing long-lasting, hard-wearing dials, but it has a certain aged charm, but keeps phenomenally good time. Very quiet, and very, very easy to wear. So that's it. It's best that we can get. Do you want to click through a few just to show people the innards?
Yeah.
I did produce.
That centre second hand is amazing, though.
I know, slightly corroded, but I'm not going to take it off and polish it. I did produce for Chris a lovely little video of me actually showing the Peloton winding system, or Peloton-esque, as we now know it is, with the winding medium of a small blob of blue tack applied to the end of a pencil, but obviously it didn't make the edit. But if we cut to the other movement shot, you should be able to see
just underneath there. Yeah.
Actually, no. Can you go back one, Chris? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I think I've managed to obscure it on pretty much both of those. That's why we put the video.
Is it the shiny bit?
It's the shiny thing, yes.
Yes.
And as you move the rotor, you'll see a little claw come out and hook the barrel and just basically drag it round. So it is only winding in one direction. The funny thing is, obviously, we talk about it copying the Peloton winding system, which is something that is very well known and very well respected, but it obviously only winds in one direction. But it's almost, so close to the Seiko's magic lever system,
exactly,
which does almost exactly the same thing, but has a push on one side and a pull on the other. So in fact, gives you a wind whichever way that the rotor is moving.
So these were first made in 59?
59, yes.
Yeah, and all the way through to 66, 67, wasn't it?
Well, they were in the catalogue until about 69, but they were probably not selling very well because they were phenomenally expensive.
Really expensive. Yeah.
And that's, again, another reason they were probably discontinued. But the movement that it was based on wasn't made after, I believe it was 1965. So I suspect the other years were just simply using up excess stock.
Such a cool thing.
It's very cool. So are you sort of saying that there were 3 different companies coming at the idea of automatic winding from slightly different angles and getting very close to each other, but not quite?
Yeah, I mean, it's all this idea of using a very fine little hook that you would ratchet around. So yeah, I mean, I suspect that they had a good long look at the peloton winding system, but based on, inspired by, doesn't necessarily mean direct and legally enforceable copy. Yeah, it's
yeah, I mean, and weirdly, these kind of stories have haunted Smiths for years, because the Lenoir, whoever it was who worked with them back at the 40s and 50s and was the movement designer, was ex-JLC, wasn't he? And people always say they copied off.
But bear in mind that
Jaeger and
Lenoir was actually there when they were making car clocks.
So all I'm saying is there's a lot of stuff that keeps getting written. It becomes lore, L-O-R-E, on the internet, and just people keep just telling it over and over and over again. It almost becomes truth. As you said, a bit like the myth busting around IWC. Most of that JLC stuff isn't particularly believable either. If you look at the movements actually on top of each other, they're not that similar. And to be honest, if you look at most manual winding movements, they're pretty similar when you look. There was a quick question from Seth saying, is that shockproof dueling made by Smiths, or was it some other Swiss componentry?
No, that is Smiths as well. They certainly, during the war, they were importing a certain amount of jewels, because they were either doing hedge hopping flights into France to pick them up. They were exporting the aluminium oxide they needed to actually make the synthetic corundum out of Switzerland. And there's a wonderful symmetry going on. We often kind of think, as one of the allies, oh God, the Swiss were dealing with the Germans, and how can this be that they were working in both directions? But actually, they were getting aluminium oxide from the Germans and selling it to us to make the jewels to go into the watches. And bear in mind that also timing mechanisms for various other military applications. But eventually, they did have totally UK-made jewels. Certainly, at the era that this watch would have been produced, the jeweling would have been done in the UK.
There's a fantastic video of it somewhere, but I can't remember if it's from the Antiquarian Horological Society of the BHI, but they found a video of people making jewels, these kind of long lines of synthetic jewel material, and then cutting them off and polishing. Anyway, it's bonkers. Richard Stenning in the audience has pointed out that the Everest watch, the real Everest watch that Hillary took up the hill, is in the Science Museum at the Clockmakers Company collection. So if people haven't seen that, haven't been to the Science Museum in London, and want to see a piece of history, not the kind of the Rolex history, but the real one, they can just pop into the Science Museum. Or it's probably
also
online.
A really detailed piece of research that's recently been published on, I think it was originally on the Military Watch Resource Forum and also appeared on Time Zone, republished there. Somebody's put enormous amount of effort into looking at what watches were worn on the final ascent, because the argument is always that, oh, well, we might concede that Hillary wore a Smiths there, but Tenzing Norgay definitely wore a Rolex. Honest, he really did. And somebody's gone into all of the photos that were taken at base camp and done their best to identify what watch he might have been wearing, and essentially debunk the fact that Rolex ever went to the top in 52 at all. And in fact, they suspect that they didn't go for another 10 years. They were, laughably, they were actually beaten by the Chinese brand Seagull, who went up about 3 or 4 years later. But
there was some fantastic letters in the Antiquarian Horological Society journal between Rolex UK and various people, including Smiths, basically admitting that they didn't get anywhere near it, and it was a Smith's watch that was worn. But those tend to get lost as well in the noise of marketing. A quick question from Kathleen: will you be posting that video with the piece of blue tack on your Instagram account by any chance?
I can do, yes. For all those who really want to see it in action, I will trim it and put it up there, and then people will see it.
And then, amazing, Anna Rolls, the curator of that collection in the Science Museum, has said, and we have it on good authority, that it went up the mountain because it was given to the collection personally by Hillary, and they've got a letter to prove it. So apart from that, Rolex are probably the first watch to be worn on the summit, apart from everything else we talked about. So there we are. Good. Brilliant.
But the other little thing that people always, it's almost like we're reluctant to admit that we were actually once really, really good at producing mass-produced wristwatches. But what was explained to me when I was looking at the history of how the machining was put together is we didn't have in the UK the generations of trained watchmakers who were really, really good at putting these things together. And so the 1215 movement, the 27CS movement that replaced it, and then things like this, the manual wind Imperial and the Automatic that you see in front of you. They are incredibly well designed and thought out. And what we had was really, really good tooling. So in fact, they were very, very easy to assemble. And being slightly cat-handed as a watchmaker myself, I'm nowhere near even a proper watchmaker, but I do dabble. They slot together so well if you take one of these apart and put them back together again. And you can see that they could have been put together by people who hadn't been trained for generations to put these together, because the cleverness of designing the toolings and how it would all slot together was in the original design. So, we weren't copying anybody else. This is homegrown manufacture. And as somebody said, it actually owes an awful lot to British clock design as much as it does to Swiss wristwatch design.
Fantastic.
And there you go.
Very cool.
There
So on the Science Museum connection, obviously no one can go to the Science Museum at the moment. And hello, Anna, nice to see you here. I may have talked Anna into allowing her and I to sneak into the Science Museum one evening after it's closed to record an episode of the podcast. This is legit. I have a Science Museum pass. I'm a volunteer there, so I help to do tours of the Clockmakers Gallery. So as long as the world returns to some vague semblance of normality, museums reopen, and we're ever allowed to leave the house again, Anna and I are in the early stages of planning some sort of podcast where we pick some items we both like from the Clockmakers Company Museum at the Science Museum. We will record it there. We'll take some pictures. Anything could happen. Like, they've got H5. I know she really wants to wear that on a chain around her neck, like MC Hammer, and
or like a nurse's fob watch.
Yeah, so
it's kind of like,
these things could happen. They probably won't, for insurance reasons, but who knows?
Good.
Anyway, so moving on. Thank you, Adrian. Massively interesting. I will now be scouring eBay and looking at very broken ones of these, and then sending you pictures of them, and you'll be telling me they're rubbish. So that's good. So we've changed my browsing history for the rest of the evening. That's good. Matt has got his head in both of his hands. I've achieved my goal. So minor diversion for a couple of minutes. As many of you know, Movember is the charity that I raise money for through Time for a Pint. Last year, I raffled off another Oris watch, Movember Diver 65, which I won from Oris in, I think, 2016, 2017. And together we raised £11,200, which is a huge sum of money. It made me the #2 fundraiser in the UK for Movember, which is pretty cool. But charities like Movember are having a bit of a hard time at the moment because the activities they do to raise money are all on hold. And today would have been the London Marathon, which is 26.2 miles. So all the different charities in the UK have got together and established the 2.6 challenge. And the idea is you go and do 2.6 of something, or 26 of something, or 260 of something, or 260,000 if you really feel like it. And I decided that I would go out and ride my bicycle. So I have a little fold-up commuter bike that I used to do like 8 kilometers to the office in the morning and do a working day and do 8 kilometers back. And anyone that follows me on my non-watch Instagram accounts has seen that I've obviously been very bored and out exploring London and covering some quite long distances on this bicycle. And I thought, hey, maybe if I'm going to go out for some exercise, I could just raise some money. So I went out this morning, I took some pictures. It was lovely out there. Empty London is great. It's a bit boring, but it is beautiful. So there's tiny folding bike, brutalist architecture, big eye things. Just before we started this, here's a great big long 37 kilometers, so a little bit more than 26.2. I got carried away, as will happen. And just before this, the total was, oh, that's one, £764. So thank you to everybody who's donated. It is massively generous of all of you. This money goes to Movember and will be go towards their mission of helping to stop men dying too young. And the three things that they're looking out for are prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and mental health. So great things to kind of get behind and support. I will share the link around. It's been in all the emails, so if you want to donate, that would be amazing. If not, no worries, it's all good. We've all got different priorities. And now back to the watches. So Matt.
Thank you. No, thank you. And I think it's important that we do take a couple of minutes out. It has been a really weird, depending on where you are in the world, it could be anything from a couple of months to just a couple of weeks, but it has been a very weird point. And personally, I must admit, I'm finding it quite tricky. So anything where we can talk about mental health issues and keep that kind of in the forefront of people's minds, so to speak, is fantastic. So the Baylor Chronograph, Baylor. Not a particularly exciting brand, to be honest. Baylor were probably a brand around in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, into the 70s and 80s. But they were originally just kind of white labeling watches out of Switzerland for people who buy them. However, what they did end up doing is becoming effectively the in-house brand for Zales in the States. So Texas, I believe, Zales out of Texas, somewhere down Houston maybe, or somewhere down there. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was the southern-ish states. So the first picture, you would have seen these kind of things all over the place. Swiss brands like Oris made them. There are versions made by Zodiac. There are versions made by just about anyone. Le Jour. People write in, and I'm sure and can tell me another 25 brands that use this kind of thing. It's the Landeron. Kathleen said she worked in one of Zales stores in Arizona as a teenager. So there we are.
Zales is actually a chain in the U.S. It's owned by Zales
still there.
Corporation.
And it's still there?
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool. For some reason, I thought it might have gone, but that's fantastic. Yeah. So apparently back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you could buy these Baylor branded watches from Zales. They did work with Hoya, apparently, allegedly. They made a couple of alarm watches and a couple of chronos, apparently using Hoya movements. But this is a Landeron 149, probably. That classic kind of 45-minute sub-register on the right-hand side, running seconds on the left-hand side, going up to 60, obviously, and the central second counter for the chrono. This one is the right way around from memory, so it does stop at the top and reset at the bottom. I do have another one, Oris, I think, that uses a slightly different version of the movement, where it resets at the top and stops at the bottom. It's all a bit confusing when it gets to 60s chronographs, which is why I tend to avoid them, to be honest. Next picture. This is original, as you can see, in terms of the bezel. Most of the numbering is kind of like washing out, as you'd expect. But it must have been quite cool back in the when it was new, with that bright red minute track around the edge and those little black numbers. You can see there's been some infill on the minute hand over on the left hand side of that picture. I got it retouched by Watchworks down in Bristol some time ago. This was another eBay buy, actually, probably 11 years ago. It wasn't that bad. As you can see, it's chrome plated and yeah, peeling. Next picture. Blurry shot of the dial, brilliant. That's exactly what you need to see. The reason I put this one in is because of the Smith's Imperial link. So if you look at this, the center second, it's got that little diamond tip on it, which is kind of similar to the Smith's Imperial. So I just wanted a little nudge there, a little thing. That didn't really work, did it, Adrian? Never mind. I'll try again. Next picture. So from the side, you'll recognize this as that classic skin diver profile. I love dive watches. I love those 60s skin divers. Lots of cool people wear them nowadays. I think James Stacey from Green NATO is a big proponent of them. Actually, our guest from last week, Jonas, also has a great Miramar skin diver. So that kind of tapered angled lug off to the sides and you know, kind of flat across is a classic look for a whole load of divers from that period. I love them. I think they look great. People are still using the shape now. So if you look at the Seikos, actually, some of the early Seiko divers had a very similar profile. It's just a cool thing. The next slide shows the case back, tested to 450 feet, 150 meters. Those of you who joined us last week will know that the previous watch I showed went down a little bit deeper, but 150 meters is about as far as I'm going to go ever, probably, and then I'll be dead anyway. But I could just about do it, probably. 333 is the deepest you can do on air, or has been done so far on air. So 150 is only half that. How difficult can it be? Maybe we'll try and do it for next week. Isolation diving. I'll just build a big kind of decompression chamber. Good. So this is on a bracelet. Most people probably have a bracelet on a watch, but the reason I chose this bracelet is, if you can get to the next one, it's got a scuba dude on it. So the scuba dude is quite often on both on the back. Yeah, exactly, a bit of that. Well, that's rude in a couple of countries, so we do need to be careful with YouTube rules. The scuba dude is on a whole load of dive watches on the front. Doxa, for example, would be the classic, or the Russian one worn by Steve Zissou in the classic movie of the same name. But he's on the back of this little bracelet clasp, so I thought that was quite cool. Anyway, that's it. That's my presentation. We're done. There are no questions. Nice one. Love it. Very cool bezel. The clasp looks amazing. Yeah, well, it's not original, so that's why it looks amazing. Plus, I've never worn it diving. I'll look at Bernard.
I like that. Go on.
Bernard in the audience has mentioned that it also looks similar to some Olak and Vax watches, OMW. Absolutely, exactly the same kind of DNA there.
I like the massive depth rating on a chronograph.
Well, presumably you wouldn't think to touch the buttons anywhere near water.
You'd hope not.
Yeah, I mean, it was tested, so it must be good.
Yeah, it's fine. Can we just agree? Go on.
Everyone's saying they love the clasp, and where did I get it from? I got it from a guy called Alistair at ATG Vintage Watches. He gave it to me, actually. It was a gift, and it's one of my favorite things I've ever received. It's just wonderful. I have no idea where to find it. It's got no marking on that I can see. I'm really sorry. Sorry.
Let's not do any isolation diving while we can't go in the sea. Certainly not to 300 meters. So health and safety for anybody that's listening / watching. Please do not attempt to go to those depths unless you've been fully trained, and even then, maybe think twice about it. It doesn't sound fun, yeah. Frankly. Any more questions from the panel, from the audience? Have you stunned people into silence, Matt?
Yet again.
Should we move on to the next watch?
We should.
Okay.
Chris, what did you bring?
So I brought this. This is the Nomos Club Campus 38 Nacht or Night. That's my terrible pronunciation. This is the only watch I think I've ever seen out of a Basel World release that I've wanted to own. There were questions last week about sort of in the run-up before last week's show, should we talk about Basel World and what's happened with various people pulling out? And Matt and I decided kind of no, mostly because we don't care. I care less than Matt. I care probably less than anyone else on the planet. I just don't care. Like I don't give a damn. I'm sorry if you're in the watch industry and you're looking forward to a party. I don't care. There's so little that gets released at Basel that I can afford, that I want to own. I find the Instagram hype deeply irritating. I find forums flooded with people talking about watches that they're not going to own and being rude about them irritating. It's like, either say something nice or don't. Like, getting onto the internet to say you don't like a $10,000 watch that you're never going to buy. No one cares what you think, dude. There we go. So minor rant over. Anyway, I saw this watch and I thought, I really like that watch and I can afford that watch. I would like to buy this watch. So it came out Basel 2017. I phoned the approved distributors in the UK for Nomos and was told that they didn't know anything about this watch and their buying department hadn't decided whether they were going to buy any watches from Nomos yet. So I may be out of luck, but I could probably buy from Nomos's website. So I kind of waited patiently and ended up getting this from a UK dealer. And I've had it since the end of 2017-ish. It's 38 millimeter. It's got 20 millimeter lugs. It's got Nomos's alpha movement in, which looks like, like this. So this is Nomos's alpha movement. This is not the movement out of my watch. Unlike Adrian, I have absolutely zero watchmaking skills. I have not attempted to remove the movement from anything, and I would not. This is
I'm only just above zero, Chris. Only
So the two of us together could cause some serious damage, is what you're telling me.
Let's not talk about the ones that have been parked in the bits drawer that will no longer work again.
Yeah. So this is a Nomos in-house caliber. I understand it is based off of I think it's an ETA 7001 maybe, and some of their early watches had the ETA movements inside. It's got some quite nice finishing on it. It's 17 joules and a 43-hour power reserve, which in practical terms means I wind this watch up on one day, I wear it, and it sort of runs out about a day and a bit later, really. I don't think I've ever had it to 73 hours power reserve. There's some big forum arguments about what power reserves mean anyway, so let's not get into that. I'm just going to go back a couple, because the thing that interested me about this watch was the dial. Nomos had the club out for a while. This is the Campus, which was I don't know if it's in Nomos's materials or if journalists were referring to it as a California dial, but that's something I'd heard kind of linked with Rolex and with Panerai. And I remember at the time digging around and found a really, really good article that is on Jake's Rolex World, which I will share in the show notes on YouTube, about the origins of the California dial and where the name comes from and kind of what this dial might be. So in his article is this picture, which is from the early 1940s. So this is a patent application, June 15th, 1942 by Rolex in France. Nothing to do with California. What you might notice is this has got Roman numerals at the top and Arabic numerals at the bottom. And the Nomos is the other way around, which I now suspect is something to do with not wanting to be sued by Rolex, potentially. So there's these different kind of dial designs. We've talked about suing people a lot today, I realise. That's 3 times. We're doing well. So these were kind of dial designs by Rolex. And what Jake kind of got into was Rolex owned this dial design. Various people kind of commented and said, oh, what about Panerai? What about this? What about Rolex bubble backs that were appearing with real redials in the 70s and 80s during that boom? And there is a note in there from James Dowling, who some of you may know as Mr. Rolex on Instagram. He is a Time for a Pint regular. I think all of us have met him and know him. And he put a note up about Kurt Rich. And in the 1970s, he was a famous dial refinisher in LA. And he was doing a lot of these dials apparently for California watch shops on Melrose. And then they were sort of disappearing out to watch fairs around the US and being traded for not very much, because back then no one was really interested, before the bubble back boom. And they just they became known as California dials. So it's kind of a nickname sort of thing, but I guess this is like either an inverse California dial or a pseudo California dial or an inspired by a California dial. I don't know. I think it was pretty. They do a white dialed version. This is the gray. There's a little bit of blue behind the numerals. There's that bright orange sweep second hand. The hands are filled with lume. The numerals are lumed. It glows quite nicely. It doesn't kind of glow the sustained craziness of a Seiko, but you can wear this all day out in the sun, put it on your bedside table, you wake up in the morning and there's still a little bit of light there. So it's pretty legible, pretty nice. It comes on sort of a suede nubuck kind of strap, which I've not worn it on. I put it back on for these pictures because I'm worried that I will damage
Nubuck.
Nubuck? I don't know.
Nubuck?
Nubuck? I don't know.
What's nubuck?
Words. Velour? I don't know. Whatever. It's grey and it's suedey. I can't tell you any more than that. I like this watch. So it has this dial. It has this movement inside. There's some nice details. I said on our setup call earlier, it has a fish on the back. I was corrected by the entire panel who said it is a whale, and Barbara who dived in to say that it is a mammal. It is a mammal, not a fish. And you are all right, and I am wrong. I know that's what you all wanted, an admission of that in public. I am wrong. So this is, they come with a solid case back. You can order a see-through case back if you really want one. It adds about £350, I think. And again, this is a recurring theme. I didn't care enough to want to look at the movement. I have a picture of the movement, so yeah. So I saved some money and kept the steel back, which has the whale on it. It's waterproof to 100 meters. I'm kind of curious about this suede strap and 100 meters water resistance. It seems like a weird combo, but hey, you know, what do I know? It's got like lots of nice little details on it. So it has Nomos on the crown in tiny, tiny letters that I didn't notice until I was taking pictures this afternoon.
Awesome.
Because my eyes are not as good as my camera. And it has Nomos on the buckle. So there's some little details. These are kind of one of the more affordable things that I think I've seen come out of the Swiss watch industry, or in this case, the German watch industry, but the Swiss watch fairs.
Thank you.
I think these are like £1,200 retail, $1,500, about 1,500 euros, 1,600 Swiss francs, I think. And this just hit like a sweet spot for me. Like I know a few people that have got these and wear them. There's not a lot in the Nomos catalog that really kind of ticks the box for me. But this felt like the Tissot's and Omegas and Longines that you see from the 1940s. But I was like, hey, a new watch with a cool dial that's got some water resistance that I can wear in a modernish size of 38 mil, which on my wrist doesn't look crazy because I have like the big wrists and ham hands. So those 1940s watches, I wear them, but they do look a little bit dinky. So yeah, this is my pick. Any questions? /accusations.
Any questions? There are quite a few acquisitions. Yeah. One question from James is asking about the difference between the in-house Nomos movements and the ETA movements they're based on. Can you just quickly go back a couple of steps? Do you mind? Is that meant to be a 7001? I don't know. I mean, as I think we said earlier, most manual wind 17 dual movements look pretty similar.
Yeah.
Adrian, what do you reckon?
It is different. It's different enough for copyright law.
I think they pretty extensively not only rework but also refinish. I mean, it's not somebody who.
This is their own movement, isn't it? I mean, this isn't refinished or reworked. This is their own. Their own movement.
So the early Nomoses that used the 7001, they had much better level of finishing on. So I believe they were the higher grade of the ETA, and then they were finished much more nicely. These are in-house, as I understand it, made in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool things.
Like their own.
Yeah, fantastic. What else?
Quick question, Chris.
Yeah.
If you don't want to refer to Californian dial fakers, I believe these were referred to as the error-proof.
Yeah, so the link I'll share for Jake's article is really good because it as well as, so the myths go.
We like a myth today.
We like a myth. We like being sued and myths.
And water.
And
water.
Yeah, so
today.
there were
wine.
Yeah. We're like Jesus. Water, wine, myth, water, and wine. I mean, what? It's not?
Yeah.
Look, I stayed muted, okay? I unmuted, all right? I did well.
Thank goodness this isn't the Easter weekend.
Anyway, so the myths, so there's the Panerai myth that Panerai came up with this dial. That's been debunked. There was the myth that these never existed as a Rolex dial. That's been debunked. Jake has got pictures of period Rolex advertising, like multiples for multiple markets in many languages.
Yeah, but Jake also says the Rolex got to the top of Everest, so we do have to be careful.
These are I believe they're scans that other people have handed over that are from magazines at the time. So there's multiple models that have these dials on. You're correct, Adrian. And they refer to it as error-proof dial and error-proof hands. So it's like great big hands filled with lume, which I guess is radium at this period. So error-proof, but also not great. And before Kathleen tells me, do not put radium dials in your mouth.
There it is. Your weekly reminder from Kathleen. Don't
Weekly
eat
reminder.
radium.
Kathleen,
Licking it as well. You're not allowed to lick it either. No
Don't lick
sniffing,
it.
no licking.
no inserting. Don't do it. Whatever you do, don't do it.
Also, don't eat Clorox. That's always
Don't eat or drink Clorox.
Yes.
Ultimately, unless it's food and clearly labelled as food, do not eat.
Right.
You can eat Matt's fries. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. So the error-proof thing is quite interesting, I guess. And the story goes, and I will share this link because he goes into it in proper depth. The idea behind having Arabic on one end and Roman numerals on the other is so you could tell which was the correct way for the dial to be up. I guess when you're not wearing it, because if you can't tell when you're wearing it, something has gone terribly wrong. Your arm has been dismembered, maybe, I don't know. But it's so you can tell which way up it is.
Yeah.
So Chris, you've ruined that now.
Exactly.
Now you've got it the other way around. It's
exactly.
You've got to know: is it Rolex? Is it Nomos?
You've turned the whole world upside down, literally. In the space of an hour, we've debunked Rolex's mountain. We've turned their dials upside down. We're never going to be invited to a Rolex event ever, ever.
I never have been, and I'm not holding my
We've
breath.
accidentally wrote Barbara into this as well. Anyway, there's a couple of questions. Couple of questions. One was in-house versus ETA movement. Which one is technically better? And which one would you pay more for? That's a really good question. You tend to pay more, obviously, for an in-house movement, although Nomos is probably at that end of the market where it's almost indistinguishable from a reworked ETA or Solita. I mean, these are 1,200 quid. Oris, they're not in-house, they're Solitas and reworked a bit, and they're about the same amount. So for an in-house movement, this is about where you start. Even the Smith's in-house movements are more expensive than that. And the second one is, how thin is it? Or thick? It's not
very thick. My kind of one complaint about this is the massive crown. So it's a hand winding watch, so it has a big crown to make it easier to do that. And the slight problem is, if you don't have this perfectly placed on your wrist, the crown will dig into the back of your hand. Like, you move in a funny way, you're going to end up with crown marks. You end the day with crown marks on your wrist, which is less than ideal. They sell their own brand of NATO strap, I think, to go with that, and I've seen it in marketing materials with that on. I haven't done that yet. I tend to wear this on a sort of old-fashioned kind of chunky leather field strap. This is quite often what my daily wear watch. Like this and the CWC Diver between them tend to be the things I grab and put on for two reasons, really. One, I'm not so worried about anything happening to them. They're easy enough to replace. And the other is, I know they're waterproof and I know the timekeeping is accurate. As anyone who has to deal with me in professional life will know, I'm late for everything, despite my love for watches. So I try to have accurate timekeeping on my wrist and then just ignore it. But yeah, I wear this often. It's not massively thick. It's got a sapphire crystal. Thing. Yeah, it's got a sapphire crystal on, so it's quite, from the side of it, you see a little lift as the box sapphire kind of comes above the case.
Can you go back so that I can see the front of the watch? Because you said it's a massive crown, but I don't find that to be a massive crown.
Yeah, that looks fine.
So.
I think proportionally on the watch, it just feels quite big, and it feels like it sticks out quite a long way.
I think it's a fantastic watch. I think they're a fantastic brand.
Yeah, I think they make some really nice watches. They made the Autobahn. The Autobahn was released last year, and I looked at those and was like, not for me. But other people
actually asked earlier about what your thoughts were, Chris, on the Tangente. I believe. If you scroll back, I think there was somebody.
Is the Tangente the thin one?
I know that it's the one that Colin Malloy of the December swears. That's what I know about Tangente.
You know much more than me.
That's his watch. I asked him. The
Tangente is similar, but it's flatter. The lugs are straight up and down. I think it's the almost pure Bauhaus version of this.
Yeah, I think.
Is that right?
Yes.
I think I tried that on at Salon QP. I think I tried that on at Salon QP, the last one that was at the Saatchi, where they had everything, and it just wasn't really for me. It didn't fit me particularly well. The watch in their collection I'd probably buy if I could justify spending the money / had the money to spend is the World Timer. I think it's cool. It's a lot of cash, but it's an in-house world time movement with the kind of, by the time you get to that point in their catalog, it has all of the technology, their swing system stuff. It's a cool thing, but it is £4,000+, which is more than I have.
And I was, I mean, I love the Lambda Vice Gold, white gold case.
Oh, those are cool.
Movement, massive swan neck on it, and a 3/4 plate. Shed loads of chattel. Shed loads of chattel. That's a hashtag and a half.
Especially if you put the screwed chattels in there. So shed loads of screwed chattels.
Oh.
Shed loads of screwed chattel. Babs is just no. This isn't good.
No.
Right.
Any more?
Surely the hour is up. Surely this is it.
Did you Babs me? Did you just?
He did.
Oh
He
no,
did.
honey. No, Babs has to be earned. Yeah. No. Yeah, that doesn't come easy. Yeah.
Now that's a hashtag. Babs has to be earned.
Yeah. There's a very small contingent of watch community folk who Babs me.
Sorry, you have a barbed wire podcast. So it should be Don't Call Me Babe, not Don't Call Me Babs.
No, that's Barb though. That's what I grew up with. I'm Barb. That's I'm from Philadelphia. Philly is very Barb. We say Barb.
I was thinking the movie.
Matt, you have very bad taste in movies.
No. Different. I'm not blonde. My boobs are nowhere near as big as hers. Yeah.
Mine are massive, so that's cool.
Yeah, right. They're huge.
Any more questions before we call it a day, before someone says something that I can't edit out?
Any other questions?
I have a question for Barbara.
Yes.
Oh God, here we go. Wait. Shoot, go ahead.
Okay. As a sporadic listener to barbed wire, I admit it. You are very, very much kind of in touch with what the American retailers are doing and experiencing, and you speak to a lot of them on a regular basis. And from a watch sales point of view, America tends to be a year or two ahead of us in terms of how much of it is happening online versus in store. I mean, for example, Omega was selling in the States for about 18 months before they were selling online direct from their own website in the UK.
Really?
And now with Watches and Wonders, as we saw this weekend, being launched online, I'm just wondering, from your experience, your communication with retailers, how are you seeing them weathering this kind of migration out of their stores and onto the web in terms of watch sales? Sorry, is that too technical and nerdy?
No, I don't think so. No, I mean, from the few that I've spoken to, again, I'm very close to members. In the US, we have an organization called the American Gem Society. And Eric Wind, I'll bring his name up again and throw him out a little play. Eric Wind and I have actually, last year at the American Gem Society's conclave in Seattle, Eric was a panelist on a panel that I moderated, a watch panel. Eric's also, when he was with Christie's, he hosted watch panels at the American Gem Society conclaves. These are the top US retailers who are usually members. So London Jewelers, Lee Michaels, a lot of these guys who carry Rolex, who carry Patek, who carry major brands are all AGS members. And they're having a virtual conclave this weekend. Obviously, all of these guys are closed right now. But I stay in contact with them because of the AGS group, because I'm a speaker in that group and I work with them a lot. And, I haven't had anybody complain necessarily about the going online. I think that a lot of these guys are still selling through their own websites just because they've made themselves available, whether it's through web chat. Again, they can't sell Rolex. If they're a Rolex user, they can't sell Rolex on their own websites. They can't do it, but
they can sell Patek now. I mean, I've seen a few of the UK retailers are allowed to sell Patek through their websites.
But here's the thing: if they remain available to their customers through their own websites, and a customer emails or sends a chat and says, "Hey, I'm looking for this ceramic bezel Rolex. Do you have it in stock?" Of course, the answer is no for the most part. But this is how they've just stayed readily available for their customers. But I haven't had a single one of, and I speak to them day in and day out, especially through Facebook. Not a single one of them has questioned that. I think a few of them had, where I found over the last couple of years, they had problems was editorial sites that started out as editorial that then became retailers. So, you know, and, you know, Matt, you were at that was part of the panel that I hosted at Horology Forum in London back in 2018. That was one of the discussions that was had was, I think a lot of these retailers who trusted big watch editorial sites suddenly felt like they were having to compete with them. And I think that to me is where I hear more complaining from the US retailers than I do. But even now, it's like that's a couple years in, and I really don't even hear much about that anymore. But no, I think I don't think any of them has an issue with. Look, they realize that all of these guys need to stay in business in the same way that they need to, and if they're carrying these brands, there is a reality. It's not going to always potentially. But these brands aren't always going to sell through their websites. They're likely going to pull it back when the era changes, when when everything kind of goes back to normal. So I think they get it. You know, they're smart for the most part, and I think it's really survival of the fittest. I said this the other day to somebody. We're going to see the weaker retailers go, but we're also going to see weaker brands go, potentially smaller brands or micro brands or independent brands. The ones who are weak, who aren't reaching people, who aren't staying top of mind, who aren't doing Zooms, who aren't doing Instagram lives, who aren't staying in people's faces, I think they're going to die out, and we're going to see the strong survive. Did that somewhat answer your question?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Anything else before I let everyone have the rest of their day back? The chat has gone very quiet, which either means people are drunk or they're just paying attention.
God.
Or both. Could be both. I think we can draw a line here today. We started out drunk. Yes, so much drunk. So thank you so much to our panelists, Adrian and Barbara, who I'm not going to call Babs because I'm not that guy.
Gotta be earned. It's gotta be earned.
And thanks to that guy, Matt, for some wonderful co-hosting once again. Thank you to everybody for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for asking questions and keeping us on our toes. We will be back again next week. Matt and I, between us, have been working hard to round up future guests. So we have people planned in, I think, for the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So we'll get the details of those out. And everyone have a great week. Stay safe. Don't do anything crazy.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Nice to see you, Adrian.